Welcome. You're listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lorilee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network and anywhere you get your podcasts. If you follow Authentic Insider Magazine, an article in there, it's called Authenticity After Trauma, Learning to Hold the Line Without Losing Yourself. If you also listened to the podcast back in season 3, it was the beginning of our discussion, post-traumatic growth. But in this article, her words kind of resonate pretty deeply because it offers real embodied understanding of what authenticity and boundaries look like after trauma. Stephanie Hutchins is a life coach and author, the founder of Serotinous Life, where she helps trauma survivors reclaim their voice and purpose. She also is the author of Transformation After Trauma, Reclaim Life After Trauma, Moving Forward, and her newest book, See Through: The Art and Cost of Radical Transparency in a World That Profits from Pretending, which is now available for pre-sale. Stephanie, is it for pre-sale or is it out now?
Oh, it comes out on January 6, 2026, but it is available for pre-order right now. So it's very exciting. Yeah.
Okay, yes, and we will have that link. And Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me again. It's great. I'm so excited to catch up with you.
I'm excited to be here, Lorilee. So thanks so much for having me on again.
Of course. Well, when Transformation After Trauma, I didn't realize you had so many other books that came out after, but I talked to you after Transformation After Trauma. And it was such a pleasure talking to you then because I like I was just telling you, we talked about post-traumatic growth. And that was really the first time I understood or even really heard it and like absorbed the idea of post-traumatic growth. And, now I've literally used the term like probably like every other podcast thanks to you, but it feels like everything has come like full circle with See Through. So this book really dives into what it means to live honestly after trauma, not just telling your truth but really embodying it, even when it costs you everything. Can you go into that?
Yeah, I think, so I have lived most of my early years of my life were very hard, and it was just struggling to survive. But it was more than survival. It was proving that my existence mattered, because I was told from little that I was nothing and I was never going to be anything. And so it was like I was always doing whatever I could to prove that I was worthy of just existing, that I was worthy of taking up space and time. And so I did everything I could to be useful, to be seen as good, to be seen as just someone, again, worthy of existing. And that usually came at the cost of myself. I was always pretending. I was pretending I was fine. I was working my tail off for years and years and years, pretending I'm fine when really I was unraveling inside. And I've gotten to a point in my life after these now book number 4, and it's like I've gone through I wrote Transformation After Trauma because I really believed and do still believe that I had experienced a transformation at that point. But the transformation hasn't finished. I'm still going through it, and I'm like on multiple renditions afterward. And now what's happening is I've seen how I've performed, like even performed transformation after trauma. Once I started a practice on post-traumatic growth, it became, oh, I can now never fail. I can now never be human. I can never now show that the messy middle of trauma healing, but then it's about seeing that no, that does a disservice, not just to myself by trying to promote an image that that you'll eventually reach this place where you're ever fully healed. and it's not
Mhm.
about that. It's about recognizing that the work, it's never going to end. I believe that's true even if we don't experience trauma, that there is always more work that needs to be done. And see through is about recognizing that work, that we're always a work in progress, but that we don't have to hide who we are right now while we are on track to becoming who we want to be next. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's the thing, is that when we're not fine, to say we're not fine,
Yeah.
right? When we don't want to be in a room or a space or in a relationship with a certain person, that it's okay to stop that. Like,
Hmm.
it's okay to draw lines. It's okay to be messy and human, even when people don't want us to be messy and human.
Those
So
aren't your people.
right. And recognizing, and that's all part of the work. And see through has been about that, of seeing myself, who I am when I'm not pretending to be the palatable version that society wants, from a woman and from a trauma survivor. But it's also being honest with myself, and when people don't fit where I am anymore in life. And it's all of that. It's all of those pieces, in accepting that that's more than okay. Like, it's okay that we change. It's okay that we outgrow roles and people. And it's all right in accepting that. But my book title says the art and cost of
Mm.
radical transparency. So it also recognizes that there's always a price to everything. So, being honest about where we are in our lives comes at a cost.
Hmm.
And so, those are things I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, yeah, that reminds me of what you wrote, high functioning trauma, like where
Mhm.
survivors appear to have it all together, like you were saying, and struggling inside. So, how does radical transparency fit into that?
Yeah, because I think part of it, so I definitely fit the mold of high functioning trauma. So I experienced, again, my early life was very hard, but I got to tell you, nobody knew. Like, almost
Mm.
nobody in my life knew. Nobody knew in my teenage years, the trauma was at its worst, and like nobody knew. In my 20s, um, I was falling apart. My partner, I found him dead. I was falling apart, and I started a new job, and still nobody knew. Like, his mother, I watched her die before my eyes, and then went into a new job a few hours later, like nothing happened. A few weeks later, I found my partner dead, in the same thing. This is how I operate. Like, nothing ever happened. And when I started sharing about what I was going through, people were shocked. Like, when I started sharing about my trauma from early on, and people who had known me my whole life, they thought I was lying,
Mm.
because they didn't believe that somebody who has a PhD, who's a professor, because I was a professor for many years, that I've traveled the world, I've done all of these things. People don't think that trauma looks like that. A lot of people
Yeah.
think trauma looks like depression and panic attacks. And yes, it can look like that and has looked like that for me, but I don't show that part of me to the world, or I
Hmm.
haven't most of my life. And I think that's where the radical transparency piece comes in, is about allowing those parts of ourselves that we have tried to erase or have tried to hide, and sometimes at people's request, that we start making those parts of us visible, and recognizing that those parts of us are okay, that we're more than okay as we are, even if the world tries to tell us that we're not. And I think that's the part of it, the cost piece too, is that people don't necessarily like when we start sharing our story. They don't
Hmm.
like sharing when we feel messy. That makes them uncomfortable. And so we start losing people, we start getting judgment. And so it becomes that choice between saying how we're feeling and what's really true for us, but also being willing to pay the price of
Mm.
that. And so that's why I also recognize that, like, I do believe that my books have shown the progression of my life, that I don't believe that I could have gotten to this place right now of speaking about radical transparency without the early work that I've done in my early books. Like, so Transformation After Trauma was mostly about the self-care tools that I used. And then the second book was about goal setting. But I don't believe I could have gotten to the point of goal setting without feeling stable with
Mhm.
self care tools. I don't feel that I could have gotten to this place right now of talking about radical transparency without having the tools in place to be able to handle the cost of being transparent in a world that doesn't really want us to be. You know?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. It is,
Mm-hmm.
it's step by step. And,
Mm-hmm.
there was a point where I felt that I'm like, gosh, everything's going so well in my healing journey. Oh my gosh. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of how, like, I can't even think what could go wrong right now because everything is going so well. Literally, the next week, everything falls apart.
Right.
And this is recent. And in my podcast a couple episodes back, I didn't even have the capacity to interview somebody. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I can fully like speak with somebody and be performative because I don't even have that in me. So I just invited my art director for Authentic Insider and I just talked and I said, I don't have the capacity today. I don't, and honestly, I'm cutting, I'm announcing this now, which I'll also talk more of in my last episode, which will be the next episode, because
Mm-hmm.
I need to take a break right now because I realize that literally like months ago was when I was like, gosh, everything is going so well. And then it was like, I do feel like it's like the universe saying, you know what, it's time to slow down and
Mm-hmm.
time to reassess. And I do feel like this is the challenge that I need to go deep into for that post-traumatic growth. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's still more growth that needs to be done.
Right.
And like you're saying, it's just it's really it's constant. And I was kind of nervous about like, okay, on my podcast, I mean, I've talked about my trauma
Mm-hmm.
more than I can remember, but I haven't talked about what's going on with me right now where it's so
Mm-hmm.
bad that I cannot, I can't do this thing that I really love doing
Mm-hmm.
right now. And so, whole concept of radical. I feel like the universe put you in my inbox where and I'm telling you, I'm like 12,000 unread emails deep and the fact that yours popped up, I was like, there was a reason for me to talk to you. I was like, of course. But then of course, I think I was delayed in responding to you because I was just like still all over the place. But your emails, when I saw, I was like, she'd be great to have to wrap most of this up.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about what inspired See Through? Like, because it is such a performative world. Like, I do feel like, I mean, I feel like I can be transparent, but there's some things where it was like, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no faking it until you make it when you're about to fall apart. But
Right.
like in a
Right.
performative world, like how did you reclaim your voice after,
Yeah.
to create this
Well,
book?
Well, so first, Lorilee, thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and show this in real time what it's like to be so transparent, okay? So that you're coming out and saying, I'm in a messy part right now. But how good is that for your listeners to hear? Because I think and I have been mistaken for a long time, and I don't know if it's necessarily mistaken, but I think it might be hope. I
Mm,
think that all of us trauma survivors all wish that at some point our past will stop affecting us.
Mm.
That at
Yes.
some point we can just live a quote unquote normal life and we won't be shackled, okay, the way that we have been in the
Mm-hmm.
past. And maybe a few books from now, I'll feel different. But
Mm-hmm.
in this moment in time, I just don't believe we're ever going to outrun our past. And
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think in many ways, it's good that we don't ever lose these chains in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. They become lighter. Some days we get to take them off a little bit and we get to just get a little bit released from the shackles. But eventually we have to be shackled back up again. And it's almost like it forces us to do the work. It forces us to stop and be present with what is happening right now and really allow us ourselves to experience life in this moment. And I think that's what I have, and this may not be true for everybody, but I feel like after having so much of my life scarred by trauma, I feel like I'm in a race to try to reclaim so much of life that I missed, that I'm trying to soak it all up and I'm just racing, but I'm forgetting to be present with right now and what's
Mm-hmm.
happening right now. And the reality is that life is a full spectrum of emotions and experiences. And the reality is that life is sometimes hard, even
Mm-hmm.
when you haven't experienced trauma. And sometimes we just have to sit with that and we have to figure out how to get through it. And I think the fact that we've experienced so much suffering, we get afraid of sitting, of standing still again, because we can remember the periods of sitting still when our past was so yucky, it was hard to deal with. So I believe that we get afraid of sitting in the future. Anytime it comes up, we get afraid. But the reality is each time, and this is why we are embodying post-traumatic growth, is I believe that this time, Lorilee, when you stop and you take time for yourself to take care of yourself, that you're going to come back even better. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're going to be different. Who knows? Will you come back to the podcast? I don't know. Will you come back to the magazine? I don't know. But I do know that whatever version of you comes back, you'll be better than you are right now
Mm.
because you slowed down and you took that time instead of barreling through and forcing yourself through. And I think that's where see through came for me,
Mm.
is that I have known for since I was a teenager. So I'm 43 years old right now. And I have known since I was a teenager that I wanted to own my own business. I've just always known it. I've always known it, but I have always been extremely insecure.
Mm.
Okay, so I was again told that I was nothing from I was a child. So I believed that. So anytime I went to reach for this goal of being a business owner and really going all in, I stepped back. I'd do it, but I'd only dabble and I'd step back. But I just kept cycling through different jobs. And everyone just didn't fit. Being a professor felt right, but being in an organization and the confines of organizations that don't want to change, that don't, have the energy or drive or passion that I may do, I just knew it wasn't the right fit. And so what happened is that, well, let's see, it's the end of 2025. So around this time in 2024, I decided to leave. I hope I'm gonna I'm gonna put it to the universe right now. I'm
Yes.
gonna put it to the universe that I hope it was my last full-time job ever. Okay.
Oh, I'm hoping
And
that for you
uh,
too.
thank you. And I slowed down and I said, I am going to do whatever it takes to work through the beliefs that have stopped me from pursuing this dream. in the
Mm.
past. I sat with it and I said, okay, in the past, what is every belief that has come up regarding money, relationships, my ability to be successful in business? What has come up? And I'm going to do whatever it takes to work through on obliterating those beliefs so that I can finally make this dream work. And I started seeing, okay, all right, I need to tackle these beliefs about money. Okay, I've
Mm.
had a 30-year eating disorder. I've dabbled in treatment, but I've never gone intense. I'm going to work on really tackling this. And and through all of this work, I started seeing a consistent message that I need, like, not just want, I need to keep showing up authentically with who I am in this moment, regardless whether people want to see this version of me or not. And
Yeah.
I was like over and over, and I kept seeing this push and pull between people not liking this version of me, not liking. I've always been outspoken, but more outspoken and more willing to saying, I'm having a bad day. I cannot show up in a way that you are deserving of today. So I'm going to take time.
Hmm.
Like being this person that would say, no, I can't be in this relationship anymore. No, I can't be in this job anymore. No, I can't do this. And seeing that over and over, it felt so right. Like finally, it felt like drawing these lines in the sand and saying, this is who I am. I'm not going to keep pretending I'm someone else. And if I'm feeling bad, that's okay. And everyone else be damned if they
Yeah.
don't like it.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to say that,
No.
but
Yes.
it's like,
This is
yes, but
everything
this is
I need to
it's
hear. This is everything this is my therapy session right here.
But isn't this the work too? Is that, and this is part of the beautiful work that you've done so far with this podcast, with your magazine, is allowing space for these conversations and allowing space for your listeners to hear that it's okay to have bad days, bad weeks, bad year. It's okay, and it's part of life. It's not just part of being a trauma survivor. And I think that's part of what we get mixed up a little bit, at least I do, is that sometimes I forget that I'm just human.
Mm.
That sometimes I default to thinking that everything I'm facing as far as struggle right now is part of my trauma, of part of what I've, experienced in the past. But the reality is it's part of the human experience. And if we don't give ourselves permission to slow down, we don't give ourselves permission to speak our truth, then how on earth are we going to give it to permission to our clients, our listeners? So by us doing this, we give the favor, we extend the favor and permission to other people. And that's what you're doing by by allowing this conversation, but also by announcing that you need time to take care of yourself because you're telling your listeners it's okay for them to do the same. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
commend you for that.
I don't think I would have been able to do this like several years ago, right? It was like, if I
Right.
don't push through it, I'm going to
Right.
be a failure.
Right.
Like, that will be the definition of failure. I quit something that I love doing, but I just didn't have it in me, right? Like,
Right.
that I knew when I was like, okay, this is probably no longer serving me, at least at this moment, right?
Right.
Because I still love these conversations that I
Right.
have.
Of
I
course.
still learn from the people, from you, like on this podcast and in the magazine, all the contributors. So it's one of those things where I was just like, and it felt right. It felt right.
Yes.
And I know that it wouldn't have been the same years ago. And
Right.
you've actually said, boundaries aren't barriers,
Right.
right? They're
Right.
bridges
Right.
back to self. And,
Yes.
that really struck me. And,
Yeah.
can you share, setting boundaries and how that connects to, nervous system regulation and authenticity?
Absolutely, because I think especially as trauma survivors, and I know there's a whole range of traumatic experiences that an individual can have in one's life, but many different forms of trauma involve boundary
Mhm.
violations. And unfortunately, as women, we are very prone to physical and sexual boundary violations.
Mhm.
And so when you have had your boundaries violated, it is very difficult to set boundaries, especially if boundary violations occurred young and they occurred for a long period of time. And so the first thing that I'll say is that even myself, like now I'm doing a lot more work on helping people with boundary setting, but I got to tell you, I'm still in the process. Like I'm not perfect at it. And I
Yeah.
think that's the piece is that I think the first step to boundary setting is acknowledging that you need to start setting them, but the process isn't going to be easy
Yeah.
in that they're not going to be clean. Like when you start setting boundaries, it's not going to be clean. You're not going to do everything gracefully. You might backtrack and want to take it back, or you might even take a boundary back while you're practicing. But the first thing you need to acknowledge is that you need to start setting them. And then it's about giving yourself permission to start setting boundaries. And I really had to it's been a practice, and I've sometimes I didn't set boundaries until I felt afraid. Like it was like a survival thing that I need to either cut people out because they were destroying me. I needed to leave a job because it was destroying me. And I just got to a breaking point. But what I'll say is that I've gotten better now at setting boundaries before it got to an extreme
Mm.
where I was in a mode of survival and I had no choice but to set the boundary. I've started looking for signs sooner that a boundary needs to be set. And one thing that I'm really getting better at, I still have work to do, but is listening to my body. And this is where the nervous system regulation comes in, is that I do believe that our body knows, like our body knows what is right for us. And I believe consciously we actually know what is best for us too, but we can override that.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
we actually take time to listen to our body and to determine what feels good or bad in our body, what feels expansive versus contracting when we think about a person or experience or an opportunity, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
if we really think about how our body is responding to us, it will tell us every time whether we should say no or yes to a person, opportunity, job, whatever it is. If we just listen, we're going to have the answer we need. But that requires staying long enough with ourselves to listen for that. It also requires some trust that we have the ability to interpret our body's signals correctly. Because that's the thing, if you've experienced physical, sexual boundary violations, then you may not trust your ability to interpret your body's signals. Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
So do understand that that's also normal, that you may not at first trust that you're making the right decision. But I think if you look collectively between the messages your mind and body is sending, you'll know. And then it's about putting it into practice that once your mind and body knows that you need to say no or yes to certain things, like yes to taking time to yourself, no to certain opportunities, no to certain people. Once you know that, it's about just taking steps to say the yes, to say the no. And that's where things get messy because it's not perfect. And when you're dealing with another human and you have to, or humans, and you have to tell them, about your boundary, they may not accept it so easily or at all. And then it becomes, another battle. And I think but I believe they're battles worth fighting. I
Yeah.
believe that it's worth fighting for what our body is asking for. Because that's the thing, regardless of the trauma we've endured, our nervous system was dysregulated, if
Yeah.
even just during that period. But for many of us, the dysregulation has continued for years, and for
Mm-hmm.
me, decades after the trauma. And I believe that my nervous system is so desperately asking me, not just asking, but begging me to start listening so it can calm down. And I think that's the part of the boundaries, is that we have to start learning, in my opinion, how to give ourselves what other people never gave us, and
Mm-hmm.
in many times was taken from us. And and setting boundaries is our way to reclaim what was taken from us, whether that was parts of our past, parts of our life, part of our body, part of our voice, whatever it was. It's about reclaiming it, in saying that it's not only okay to have a voice and to say what's right and wrong, but we deserve it. And to actually be happy, we have to get our nervous system to calm down. And and sometimes that means saying yes to us and no to other people, even when other people mean the world to us. It's about saying yes to us so we can show up better in the future. But for right now, in these moments, when our nervous system is asking for it, it's about giving our nervous system what it needs, and everyone else be damned.
Yes. Well, that's exactly, I love how, being able to sit with yourself because for the longest time, even in the beginning of my healing journey, I couldn't just sit with myself. And I didn't trust myself. But in this latest decision about, taking a break, I just noticed myself seeing emails and being like, oh my God, I haven't responded to these emails. And it would just give me so much anxiety. And I didn't know like how to respond. And I was like, okay, this doesn't feel right. Like not a panic attack, but I'd wake up in the morning, my heart was racing and it didn't feel good at all. And I remember just kind of quieting myself and just sitting in bed um, when I woke up and just like, well, what is it? What can I do? I, I was still. I just kind of listened to my body, and that's when I was like, maybe this isn't working for me right now. Maybe this isn't the right time. And to make a big decision like that, I haven't done that since my healing journey started in 2020. And it was just that. It was listening and it felt right. It felt right when I connected to my body and I was like, okay, this is the answer. And it felt really good.
Yeah. And I think it's incredible that you stop to listen. And I think one thing I'd like to say, for your listeners, is that it feels really good to finally listen. But one, I guess, word of caution is that sometimes we're not in environments who are so supportive, or are supportive of us listening to our body's intuition. And that when we start making decisions based on what our body is telling us is right or wrong, that some people aren't going to be so happy
Mm-hmm.
about it. And that's a whole other level of challenge. But what I got to tell you is that any resistance, so everything comes with a cost, okay? So not listening to your body's intuition is going to come with a cost, but also listening to your body's intuition is going to come with a cost too, because
Mm-hmm.
once you start moving forward, you may have people who might be like, if you give up a job, or you give up, or if you step aside from a podcast, or, you know, people may say, but I don't want that. This was what I needed. You were what I needed. And da, da, da. The whole list can go on and on. But that's a whole other kind of staying. That the staying in the sitting with yourself isn't just in the moment of listening, with what your body is asking in that moment. The staying is also when you face resistance to your decision. When
Mm-hmm.
you start telling people what you've decided, you may face resistance. And I encourage you to stay again and again and remind yourself why it is worth listening, that it is worth persisting through any form of resistance you may face when you're setting a boundary for yourself and for your nervous system, that you persist because you're going to be uncomfortable no matter
Mm-hmm.
what. So
Mm-hmm.
you might as well choose the version of comfort, a discomfort that's going to make you more comfortable at the end of it. Because if we continue to abandon ourselves, because we either don't want to stay with the discomfort, whatever it is, we don't want to listen, we don't want to deal with the resistance from other people, we're just going to stay miserable. And we are just going to keep cycling through it. We're just going to being traumatized in other ways.
Yeah.
It's like, how are we ever going to get freedom? And that's in my book, I talk a lot about being see through. You're doing it to be free.
Mm-hmm.
It's about freedom. And it's about stopping this performance just for everyone else and to start actually living for ourselves. And it sounds sort of cliche, but who on earth else matters?
Right.
Because the reality is, even if we have families and loved ones, we really have to show up best for ourselves first. And we can't if we keep overriding what our body is telling us to appease everybody else.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. That's so right. Stephanie, is there anything else that you would like to add?
so I think I've said a lot of the things, but I think
Mhm.
I really want to make sure that your listeners know that you're not broken. Okay. I think maybe the better B word is buried. You're
Mm,
buried. If you're feeling stuck, it doesn't mean you're broken. I believe it means you're just buried. You're buried under years of trauma and stress and other people's expectations
mm,
and other people's condemnation and judgment, and it's just about uncovering who you really are and who you always were, but were never allowed to be.
mm.
And then I
Yeah.
think it's about really allowing yourself to meet yourself for the first time, um, standing in what you fully like. This is what I call embodied healing, that where you really embody feeling good and feeling free. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you're always going to feel like it every moment. But when you start to really listen to what your nervous system is asking for and you stop fighting it, you feel more free. I can feel like I have visible fractures in my teeth from the way I clench my jaw at night and during the day. And so I have to be mindful of when my jaw is clenching. And I really can feel the release when I listen to my body. And I encourage our listeners to do the same, that when you start honoring what your body is asking for, you will start to feel where tension once existed in your body, you will feel it start to detach, even just slightly. And as that happens, you begin to feel freer. You can breathe easier and it becomes easier to make the next decision. And then it becomes easier to face the next bit of resistance. And it
Yeah.
won't be easier. It won't be always easy, but it will get easier.
Yes.
Okay.
I
And I think that's
yes.
the piece, is that being easy is different than just getting easier over
Right.
time. Um, And so I wish everyone well on their journey, including you, Lorilee.
Well, thank you so much. That was so beautifully said. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your incredible new work that I'm really, really excited about.
Thank you. Thank you. And I sending you lots of healing blessings for your time to come that's coming up. Okay.
I appreciate that. Well, you can learn more about Stephanie Hutchins and her new book, See Through, at Serotinous. I know I always get this wrong, but it's
I
it's
I know.
Serotinous
I was
Life.
sorry for everyone that I picked the business name,
No,
Serotinous Life.
no, it's me. It's serotinouslife.com/C dash through. And I'll also have that link in the show notes. So don't even worry about it. And, for those who are listening, you can also watch this episode on YouTube. So don't forget, you can visit traumasurvivorthriver.com to find the YouTube channel, to listen to past episodes, and also access the latest issue of Authentic Insider Magazine, where Stephanie so kindly shared her beautiful story. So be sure to check it out. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast on Mental Health News Radio Network. I'm Lorilee Binstock. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Take care.